Hi, I'm Pastor Dave, teaching evangelist with Lamb and Lion Ministries. As we continue in our TV series on the book of Daniel, this week I'm going to take a deep dive into chapter 10. So far, each chapter has been a self-contained unit, but now that changes. Chapters 10, 11, and 12 are all one unit. This is Daniel's final vision, and this unit is considered Daniel's most detailed prophecy. The events of this prophecy are so detailed and so precise that critics say these chapters must have been written after the events took place. Well, the opening verses, they provide the date of this final vision. The book of Daniel opens in chapter 1, verse 21 by saying, Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. But here in chapter 10, verse 1, we're told this is the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So here's the question. Do these two verses contradict themselves? No, they don't. Chapter 1 does not say that Daniel's career ended. Chapter 1 just confirms that he continued in a position of leadership until the Medo-Persian Empire was established. Which brings us here to chapter 10. This vision is 2 years after chapter 9, which makes Daniel about 85 years old. The fact that his Babylonian name is given confirms this is the same Daniel as chapter 1 when Nebuchadnezzar gave him that name. Daniel says this vision was true, meaning it would be fulfilled. This last vision dealt with the great warfare. This term great refers to a long period, meaning this vision does not refer to a single war, but to a long period of trouble for Israel, a period that is still active even today. As this book opened, Daniel said he had understood the message and had an understanding of the vision. However, in chapter 12, he says, I heard but could not understand. Now, this is common with prophets. They often require a divine interpretation, usually from an angel. In Daniel chapter 10, verse 2, it switches from third person to first person. He says he mourned for 3 weeks. We're not told what caused Daniel to go into mourning. There are 3 possible reasons. First, he was upset at the lack of response to the decree of Cyrus, which had been 2 years since Cyrus issued the decree allowing the Jews to return home. That would be Ezra 2 and Nehemiah 7. Second, when they did return to Jerusalem, the people were discouraged by the number of obstacles they faced. We find that in Ezra chapter 4. And third, Ezra also explains the construction of the temple stopped shortly after it had begun. So, as a government official, Daniel would have received reports from Israel, and these reports would have included what we're talking about. It would explain the obstacles and the halting of the construction of the temple. And obviously, these reports would not have been encouraging for Daniel to receive. In verse 3, it reveals the extent of Daniel's mourning. Besides for not eating, he abstains from anything that would have brought him pleasure, such as putting oil on his face, which we see in Psalm 45 or Proverbs 27. Verse 4 reveals the time of Daniel's fast would have been during the Passover festivals. The first month of the Jewish calendar is the month of Passover. This was a time of feasting, not fasting. Passover could only be observed where the Ark of the Covenant was. We see this first at Shiloh, then in Jerusalem. Because the Ark was not present in Babylon, Daniel did not violate the law of Moses by not celebrating Passover. Verse 4 explains at the end of the 3 weeks, at the end of this period of fasting, the vision then begins. Daniel is physically at the edge of the Tigris River. It was believed when Israel was outside the Holy Land, the land given to their forefathers, God would only speak to them in clean places, such as a place of water. We see this in Ezekiel chapter 1, and we also see it in the New Testament. We see this is where Paul met Lydia, a place of prayer besides a river. That's Acts chapter 16. Now back to Daniel. The Tigris River was 20 miles from Babylon. In verse 5 and 6, Daniel makes 7 points about the man who appears to him. He was dressed in linen, which emphasizes purity. This was the kind of garment worn by the priest for priestly service. His waist was girded with a belt of pure gold, which is a mark of royalty. His face had the appearance of lightning, like the Shekinah glory. His eyes were like flaming torches, emphasizing discernment and penetrating insight. His arms and feet were like polished bronze. Bronze in Scripture represents judgment. The sound of his words were like the sounds of a multitude. Who is this? Some say it was the pre-incarnated Christ because the description does match the description of Jesus in Revelation chapter 1. However, in verse 13 here in Daniel, it says this man tells Daniel he needed the assistance of Michael in his conflict with the prince of Persia. And Jesus would never require or need the help of an angel. Because of that, some believe this is probably the angel Gabriel. I'll let you decide who you believe Daniel saw that day. See, what is important is how Daniel responded and what was said. In verses 7 to 9, we have Daniel's reaction. He reveals that he was not alone. Others were there with him on the bank of the river. Again, we're not told why he was there or who he was with. Were these fellow government officials or were these friends of his? All that Daniel shares about this is that he alone witnessed the appearance of the vision. He does emphasize the men with him did not see the angel, but they knew something strange had happened. It says they shook with fear, in terror. They could not stand in this presence. This is similar to Paul or Saul in Acts chapter 9. Daniel gives us some details as to what he experienced. He says he was left alone. The men who were with him, they fled. He said he saw this great vision. He said he had no strength left in him. He said his color turned to a deathly pale. He said he retained no strength. He said he lost his ability to stand. He said he heard the sounds of his words. He heard the angel's voice. He said as soon as he heard the sound of his words, he fell into a deep sleep. He fell on his face. He fainted, falling face first, just as Abraham did in Genesis chapter 15. Now that was quite a reaction to this divine interaction. In verse 10, the angel touched him and sent him trembling on his hands and knees. In verse 11, the angel's message contained his purpose for coming to Daniel. As in chapter 9, he tells Daniel he is greatly beloved. In the New Testament, the Apostle John, another man of prophecy, is called by the same term of endearment. Daniel was then told to stand to receive the message. Verses 12 to 14 describes the unseen world. Gabriel was supposed to arrive the same day Daniel started fasting, the day when Daniel humbled himself before God. Daniel's words were heard in heaven, and the angel was immediately dispatched to answer Daniel's prayer. In chapter 9, Gabriel arrived before Daniel even finished his prayer, but in chapter 10 here, the angel is delayed. So, what caused the delay? Verse 13 explains the reason for the angel's delay. The angel was resisted by a fallen angel of high rank. We're told this demon is the prince of the Persian kingdom. Satan wages a special war of hatred against the Jewish people, both as God's chosen and as the source of the messianic line. Satan did not want Daniel to be given this message or to record it. So he sent a leading angel, a demon, to stop it. Michael, who is an archangel, has authority over other angels. Some angels serve as guardians of nations, and Michael is the guardian over Israel. Michael was able to do battle with this demon angel without any assistance, allowing Gabriel to come to Daniel. Demons do interfere with the nations, especially with leadership and political affairs. There is an unseen war taking place behind the affairs happening on earth. Now, like in human government, there is a hierarchy in the angelic world. Fallen angels are organized into rank. 1 Corinthians 15 says in the end times, God will abolish all rule and all authority and power. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 lists powers, principalities, and world rulers and spiritual forces of wickedness. And then in Colossians 2, verse 15, lists principalities and powers. All this explains different ranks of demonic forces. Daniel 10 lists the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Daniel 10, verse 20, lists the prince of the kingdom of Greece. See, demons have three common activities. They try to stop the purpose of God, as seen here in Daniel 10. In Revelation 16, they will aid in the gathering of nations to attack Jerusalem and to try to stop the second coming of Christ. Well, this ends in Armageddon and the destruction. In Ephesians chapter 2, this explains how demonic forces try to extend Satan's authority by doing his bidding. This is why Paul tells us to put on the full armor of God. The purpose for the good angels coming to Daniel is explained further in verse 14. This is a critical verse to understand. It's critical. He says, now I have come to give you the understanding of what will happen to your people in the later days. For the vision pertains to the days yet future. I have come to give you an understanding. Again, Daniel needed help understanding the message God was about to entrust him with. He is told this message is for Israel and it was for the future. The angel came to give this understanding to Daniel. He needed to have this explained to him. Verses 15 to 19 explains Daniel's response. Verse 15 shows the effect the angel's words had on Daniel. He was overwhelmed. He was rendered speechless. And once again, he was reduced to weakness. In verse 16, for a second time, the angel touches Daniel, this time on the lips. 3 times, Daniel refers to the angel as Lord, which in English, this would be the same as addressing someone as Sir. Daniel is not referring to the personal name of God. He explains anguish has come upon him, that he retained no strength. In verse 18, for the 3rd time, Gabriel touches Daniel. This touch allows Daniel to regain some strength. And in verse 19, the angel continues to comfort Daniel. For the 3rd time, he reminds him that he is beloved by God. As a beloved prophet, Daniel was not to have fear, but he was to have peace. Shalom. Notice in verse 20, the angel asked a question. Do you understand why I came to you? He asked, now that you have regained some of your strength, do you comprehend why I came? And for now, it's a rhetorical question because Daniel does not have an answer. The angel said he must return to continue the fight with the prince of Persia. The decree of Cyrus had already been issued and the spiritual battle had begun. The decree was the connection to the rebuilding of the temple and with Jerusalem. Those back in the Holy Land were facing difficulties. They were in the midst of a spiritual battle. The angel told Daniel, the prince of Greece is about to come. And that's exactly what happened. The empire of Greece defeated the empire of Persia, which meant the Jews will now fall under the power of the Greek empire. In the spiritual world, the demon prince of Greece replaces the demon prince of Persia. The spiritual battle continues. In verse 21, the angel speaks about what is inscribed in the writing of truth, which is what is written in the books in heaven. Things recorded that was, that is, and what will be. Parts of the writing of truth is the Bible. Now, this chapter ends with Gabriel knowing that when he went back to fight against the demonic world, Michael will be there with him. Again, chapters 10, 11, and 12, this is all one unit. This week is chapter 10. Next week, I'll pick up with chapter 11. Until then, we can all look up and cry out, Maranatha, Lord Jesus.